in the quiet town of Willow Creek. The last golden leaves of autumn danced in the crisp October breeze. The year was 2015, and the air had the sweet scent of pumpkin spice and the distant echo of laughter. It was Halloween night, and the streets were pockets of shadows and flickering light as children of all ages roamed in a masquerade of joyful terror. Ethan, a lanky 14-year-old with a mop of unruly hair and a heart full of hope, stepped out of his house dressed as a pirate. His costume was a patchwork of thrift store finds and a plastic sword that clanked against his shin with every step. His mother called out from the doorway, her voice a warm melody that was quickly swallowed by the night. "Remember, Ethan, don't go too far." Ethan's usual band of brothers, Mike and Jake, had deserted him for the more alluring company of their girlfriends. They had promised a night of epic trick-or-treating adventures, but as the moon climbed higher, it became clear they had other plans. So he walked alone, his plastic pumpkin bucket swinging by his side, feeling both the thrill of the evening and the sting of abandonment. As he turned the corner, he spotted a solitary figure leaning against a lamppost, a cloud of smoke curling around his head like a halo. It was Deshawn, his friend from school, who lived a few streets over in the part of town where the lawns weren't quite as manicured. Deshawn's costume was more authentic than any store-bought ensemble. He was dressed in baggy jeans, a oversized hoodie, and a bandana that partially obscured his face. He waved a gloved hand in the air, beckoning Ethan over with a grin that gleamed in the dim light. "What's up, E-Dog?" he called out. The name a recent invention that Ethan hadn't quite warmed up to. "You ready to get this candy haul?" Ethan's eyes lit up at the prospect of companionship. He jogged over to Deshawn, his costume jingling with every step. "Yeah, I'm ready," he exclaimed, the excitement in his voice betraying his earlier disappointment. Deshawn's grin grew wider, and he clapped Ethan on the back. "Good, 'cause I got a whole crew waiting for us. They're gonna show us how the big dogs do Halloween." The crew was a motley assortment of older teens, their faces twisted into menacing grins, their costumes more of an afterthought than an effort. They reeked of weed and testosterone, their voices a cacophony of cackles and taunts as they lounged against the side of a dilapidated house. They greeted Deshawn with a chorus of "What's up, D?" and barely spared Ethan a glance, their eyes raking over his pirate costume with a mix of amusement and contempt. One of them, a burly kid with a bald head and a fake scar painted onto his cheek, sneered. "Looks like we got ourselves a faggot pirate," he jeered, and the others erupted into laughter. Ethan felt his cheeks burn, but Deshawn stepped in, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Come on, let's not scare off the new blood before he's had a taste of the fun." He turned to Ethan, lowering his voice. "Don't worry about them, E-Dog. They're just messing with you 'cause you're fresh meat." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach. The night grew darker, and the air grew colder, but the adrenaline coursing through Ethan's veins kept him warm. Deshawn led him from house to house, and with every door that opened, the group grew bolder. They didn't just ask for candy, they demanded it, their language peppered with curses and threats that made even the bravest homeowners quiver. The bald kid, who went by the name Scary Larry, produced a BB gun that looked eerily like a real AR-15, and the sight of it was enough to make the adults hand over the goods without protest. Ethan watched in horror and fascination as the night descended into a whirlwind of chaos. They didn't just take candy, they smashed pumpkins, egged cars, and toilet-papered trees. Each act of vandalism brought a fresh wave of exhilaration and fear. He was torn between the thrill of being part of something bigger than himself and the sinking feeling that he was in over his head. Deshawn caught his eye, his expression a silent challenge, and Ethan knew he had to keep up or risk being left behind. The tension grew thicker with every step, the shadows dancing menacingly around them. The group grew more daring, their laughter turning into snarls as they sought new targets for their mischief. And in the midst of it all, Ethan clutched his plastic pumpkin, now heavy with the spoils of their conquests, feeling the weight of his choices dragging him down. He had crossed a line and there was no going back. The sweetness of the night had turned sour, and the candy in his bucket tasted like ashes in his mouth. As the witching hour approached, the gang grew restless, their eyes glinting with a hunger that wasn't satisfied by sugar alone. Deshaun leaned in close to Ethan, his breath hot against his ear. "You ready for the main event?" he whispered, a sinister glint in his eye. Ethan nodded, his heart racing, unsure of what was to come but unable to resist the allure of the darkness. That had embraced him. The group moved as one, their footsteps echoing down the deserted streets like the approaching footfall of a monster in a nightmare. Scary Larry broke into a run, the BB gun held tight in his grip, and the others followed suit. They were hunting now, the prey clear in their sights, a group of younger kids, no more than 10 years old, their eyes wide with terror as they saw the older teens bearing down on them. The smaller children dropped their buckets and scattered, their candy spilling like a rainbow of hope into the night. Ethan's legs moved of their own accord, propelled by the energy of the pack, his conscience screaming for him to stop, but the thrill was too great. The chase was on, and the night grew wilder. The air was filled with the sound of running feet and the harsh laughter of the predators. Ethan's pirate hat fell off, forgotten in the rush of adrenaline. The group of terrified children disappeared into the maze of houses, but the older teens had other plans. Scary. Larry skidded to a halt, his boots scraping against the pavement. "Hold up. Let's take a breather," he said, his voice a low rumble. He pulled out a thick, green blunt and lit it with a flourish, the tip burning a fiery orange. The sweet, pungent smell of marijuana filled the air, mingling with the scent of burning leaves and the distant throb of bass from a Halloween party. Deshaun slapped the blunt into Ethan's hand, his eyes glinting with mischief. "Take a hit, E-Dog. It'll help you keep up with the big boys." The pressure was palpable, and Ethan, not wanting to disappoint, took a tentative puff. The smoke filled his lungs, and as he coughed it out, the world around him seemed to spin and tilt. The sound of Fetty Wap, My Way floated on the breeze, a macabre soundtrack to their twisted festivities. The music grew louder as they approached. The source, a house with the lights blazing and the bass rattling the windows. The beat pounded in Ethan's chest, each pulse syncing with his racing heart. As the smoke swirled around them, Ethan's paranoia grew. The shadows seemed to twist and leer, the laughter of the other kids transforming into the cackles of demons. The candy in his bucket felt like rocks, weighing him down with each step. He took another hit, hoping it would ease his nerves, but instead it sent his anxiety spiraling. The world grew hazy and he stumbled, almost dropping the plastic pumpkin. The taste of the weed was bitter on his tongue, and he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The group gathered around him, their costumes blurring into a sea of darkness. They laughed and jeered, passing the blunt around like a grim communion. The music grew louder, and Ethan felt like he was being swallowed by the night. The house ahead looked like a beacon of malevolence, the lights flickering in time with the bass, casting eerie patterns on the ground. His heart hammered in his chest, and he realized he didn't know where they were anymore. The streets of Willow Creek had become a labyrinth of fear, and he was lost in it with monsters as his guides. The party inside the house was in full swing, the throbbing beat of the music spilling out into the street. The door was open, and Ethan could see the silhouettes of bodies dancing in a frenetic blur. Deshaun grabbed his arm, his grip like a vice. "Come on, we're gonna crash this shindig," he shouted over the din, his words slurred and menacing. Ethan's stomach churned, but he followed, the paranoia from the weed turning his insides to ice. He knew he should be scared, but the thrill of the chase still had him in its grip. As they stepped into the house, the music washed over them like a wave. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and sweat, the strobe lights painting the room in a stark, pulsing rhythm. Kids in costumes bumped and grinded together, lost in the chaos of the night. Ethan felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Scary Larry, the BB gun now slung casually across his back. "You with us, little pirate?" he sneered. Ethan nodded, his eyes wide with fear and excitement. The group pushed through the partygoers, leaving a trail of uneasy glances in their wake. Suddenly, a parent at the edge of the room spotted the gun and froze. His hand shot out, yanking his child behind him, his eyes wide with terror. He screamed, "Get down! Get down!" As Larry strutted by, his legs spread wide, shouting the lyrics to a Chief Keef song. The room stumbled to a halt, the music seeming to fade into the background as the panic grew. Ethan watched, his heart racing, as the parent's face turned from fear to anger. He recognized the man from around town, Mr. Thompson, a burly man with a stern look who didn't take kindly to trouble. "That's not real!" Ethan yelled over the music, trying to defuse the situation, but his voice was lost in the cacophony. The room erupted into chaos as parents grabbed their kids and dashed for the door, the music now a frantic backdrop to the horror unfolding. Larry, fueled by the power of his fearsome disguise, reveled in the panic. He raised the BB gun in the air, spitting out the words to the song, the muzzle flashing with the strobe lights. The sight of the gun had the partygoers ducking and screaming, the festive spirit of Halloween shattered by the very real fear of violence. Ethan felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead, his costume suddenly feeling like a prison. He looked to Deshawn for guidance, but his friend's eyes were glazed over with excitement, a twisted grin plastered on his face. The group moved through the house, knocking over decorations and spilling drinks. The music, now a distant throb. Ethan felt like he was in a nightmare, his feet moving of their own accord as the horror unfolded around him. They reached the backyard, where a bonfire cast a hellish glow on the terrified faces of those who had fled the party. The BB gun was now pointed at the sky, Larry's laughter echoing through the night like the howl of a madman. Ethan's mind raced, trying to think of a way to stop this before it went too far. He knew he couldn't just run. He had to do something. As the group gathered around the bonfire, he saw his chance. He darted forward, his hand reaching for Larry's gun, but before he could grab it, the world exploded in a burst of light and sound. Someone from the shadows had opened fire. Screams of fright turned to cries of terror. The BB gun was nothing compared to the roar that now filled the night, sending the party into a frenzy of panic. Ethan felt his heart drop into his stomach as he realized what was happening. He wished with all his might that Mike and Jake were here, that he had never left the safety of their friendship for this hellish night. The ground was wet with spilled drinks and the tears of terrified children. The smell of gunpowder mingled with the sickly sweet scent of burning plastic. Ethan's pirate costume felt like a joke now, a sad reminder of the innocent fun he had once thought this night would hold. He stumbled, his legs threatening to give, out beneath him, and he dropped to his knees, the plastic sword clattering uselessly beside him. He was too scared to move, too scared to think. Around him, the chaos grew. People were falling, their costumes stained with crimson. The gunfire was relentless, the sound echoing through the night like a symphony of death. Ethan's eyes searched the crowd for any sign of Deshawn or the others, but all he saw were strangers dressed as monsters, their faces twisted with fear and anger. He had made a terrible mistake, and now he was paying the price. He curled into a ball, his candy-filled pumpkin shielding his head, and he wept. The warmth of his tears mingled with the cold October air, creating a salty mask on his cheeks. He hated himself for being here, for letting Deshawn and the others pull him into this nightmare. He missed the simplicity of his old life, the safety of his childhood, the warmth of his mother's voice calling him home. The gunfire stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving only the cries of the injured and the frantic whispers of those hiding. Ethan didn't dare move, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He could feel the pumpkin's plastic digging into his forehead, the weight of his decision crushing him. The world had gone mad, and he was just a small, lost boy in the middle of it all. Sirens wailed in the distance, a distant promise of salvation. The group of teens around the bonfire had scattered, leaving Ethan alone with his fear. He peeked over the edge of his makeshift shelter, his eyes searching for any sign of his friends. They were nowhere to be seen. The only thing left was the acrid smell of gunpowder and the bitter taste of regret. The night had turned into a horror show, and Ethan was the star, trapped in a scene he never wanted to be a part of. He had to get out of here, find help, do something. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling like jello. The house was a blur of movement as people rushed to escape the carnage. He stumbled through the shadows, his eyes searching for an exit, his mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next. As he reached the fence at the back of the property, he heard a rustle behind him. He spun around, expecting to see a monster from his worst nightmares, but instead it was Deshawn, his eyes wide and wild. "We gotta get out of here, man!" he shouted, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him along. "They're coming!" The two boys sprinted. Through the dark, the sound of sirens growing louder with every step. Ethan's costume felt like it was choking him, a suffocating reminder of the innocence he had lost. He didn't know where they were going, didn't know what they would do next, but he knew one thing for sure. This Halloween would be burned into his memory forever, a scar on the fabric of his soul that would never fade. They stumbled into an alley, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. Deshawn leaned against a dumpster, his chest heaving. "We gotta lay low," he panted. "They're gonna be looking for us." Ethan nodded, his mind racing with questions and fear. The world had shifted, and he was no longer the pirate hero he had dreamed of being that night. He was a participant in something darker, something he didn't fully understand. The cold metal of the dumpster was a stark contrast to the warmth of the night's events, grounding him in reality. He watched as Deshawn pulled the bandana from his face, his eyes bloodshot and his smile gone. The facade of the fun-loving prankster had crumbled, revealing the desperate, scared boy beneath. "You okay, E-Dog?" Deshawn asked, the concern in his voice genuine. Ethan nodded again, unable to form words. They waited in silence, listening to the sirens grow closer, and then fade away. The alley was a cocoon of darkness, a stark contrast to the chaos of the world outside. Finally, Deshawn spoke, his voice low and serious. "Look, man, I didn't know it was going to go down like that. I just wanted to show you a good time, you know?" Ethan searched his friend's eyes, looking for a shred of truth amidst the fear and confusion. "We gotta stick together," Deshawn continued, his grip on Ethan's arm tightening. "We can't let them catch us. You got my back?" Ethan nodded again, the gravity of the situation weighing on him like an anchor. He didn't know if he had the strength to go on, but he knew he had no choice. They were in this together, bound by the horror they had unleashed. As if on cue, the screech of tires pierced the silence, and a pair of glaring headlights cut through the alley. A cop car slammed to a stop, the door flying open. A burly officer, with a face carved from granite, stepped out, his eyes sweeping over the two boys. "You two the ones causing all the trouble?" he barked, his hand already on his nightstick. Deshawn tried to play it cool, but his voice trembled. "Nah, man, we're just out trick-or-treating." The lie sounded hollow, even to Ethan's ringing ears. The cop's gaze narrowed, and he took a menacing step forward. "I said, are you the ones causing trouble?" With a snarl, the officer grabbed Deshawn, yanking him away from the dumpster. "You little nigger, you think you're tough with that gun?" he spat, the racial slur hitting Ethan like a slap to the face. Deshawn's eyes widened, and he tried to protest, but the cop didn't give him a chance. He slammed Deshawn against the car, the metal denting with the force of the impact. Ethan's world spun as he watched his friend crumple under the officer's fists. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs were rooted to the spot. The cop's partner emerged from the car, a sneer twisting his lips. "You got a problem, kid?" he asked, cracking his knuckles. Ethan felt the cold barrel of a gun press into his back, and the world tilted on its axis. The beating was swift and brutal. The night air filled with the sickening sounds of flesh and Deshawn's muffled cries. Ethan's pirate costume was torn to shreds, the plastic sword a pathetic defense against the officer's rage. He could feel his own fear building, threatening to overwhelm him. This wasn't the night he had signed up for, the adventure he had hoped to find in the arms of the older kids. This was a nightmare, and he was living it. As the cop's fury grew, Ethan felt his own anger rising. He had to do something, had to stop this. He clenched his fists, the candy in his pumpkin forgotten. He took a step forward, his voice shaking, but determined. "Stop it!" he yelled. "You're hurting him!" The blow came out of nowhere, knocking the wind out of him. He crumpled to the ground, stars dancing before his eyes. The world went dark for a moment, and when he came to, he was lying on the cold pavement, his face wet with blood and tears. Deshawn was gone, the alley silent except for the distant wail of sirens. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, his body aching, and his spirit broken. He stumbled out of the alley, the taste of fear thick in his mouth. The night had become a twisted reflection of his own soul, a landscape of shadows and pain. He had to get home, had to tell someone what had happened. But as he staggered through the streets of Willow Creek, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The lights from the cop car faded into the night, leaving Ethan alone in the aftermath of the horror. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now he had to live with the consequences. The laughter and joy of Halloween had been replaced with the bitter taste of betrayal and fear. He had become a ghost in his own town, haunted by the actions of the monsters he had once called friends. The cold air stung his skin, but he barely felt it. His mind was racing with the images of the night, the screams and the gunfire playing on repeat. He clutched his pumpkin, now a sad symbol of the night's events, and began to walk, each step taking him further from the innocence of his youth and closer to a reality he never wanted to face. But fate had other plans. As Ethan stumbled down the street, he heard the all-too-familiar laughter of the gang he had left behind. His heart sank, and his legs grew heavier with each step. They emerged from the shadows, their costumes now tattered and stained with the night's dark deeds. Scary Larry's teeth gleamed in the moonlight as he pointed the BB gun at Ethan. "You snitched, you little faggot pirate," he sneered, his voice a mix of anger and betrayal. The others closed in, their eyes burning with a rage that Ethan hadn't seen before. They had transformed from the cool older kids into a pack of rabid animals, hungry for vengeance. He tried to back away, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. They grabbed him, their grips like iron, and slammed him against a brick wall. "You think you're better than us?" Larry spat. "You think you can just tell on one of us and get away with it?" The words barely registered as they began to pummel him, their fists and feet raining down like a storm of fury. Ethan's body was a canvas for their anger, each blow painting a new shade of agony. He felt himself slipping away, the world going fuzzy around the edges. And then, in a moment of sickening clarity, they ripped his pants off, exposing him to the cold night air. "Look at his small-ass dick," one of them jeered, and the others joined in the taunts, their voices a chorus of cruelty. The pain was unbearable, but the humiliation was worse. They had stripped him of everything: his dignity, his friendship, his trust. He was just a body, a punching bag for their rage. They laughed as they kicked and hit him, each blow driving home the reality that he was nothing to them. They had used him, and now they were discarding him like a piece of trash. Ethan's mind screamed for it to stop, for the nightmare to end, but his body was a traitor, refusing to respond. He was aware of the tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood and sweat, but he couldn't bring himself to care. The world had gone dark, and he was lost in it, adrift in a sea of pain and despair. But amidst the chaos, he found a spark of defiance. He wouldn't let them win. He wouldn't let them take his humanity. With a roar that surprised even himself, Ethan surged forward, pushing through the pain. His hand closed around the BB gun, the cold metal a comforting weight in his grip. He swung it with all his might, the plastic smacking against Larry's skull with a satisfying thunk. The group paused, stunned, and Ethan took advantage of the momentary reprieve to scramble away, his legs shaky but moving. The gun felt like a lifeline, a tool of power in his trembling hand. He had to get out of here, had to escape the clutches of these monsters. He stumbled down the alley, the sound of their footsteps echoing behind him like the beat of a funeral. March. The pain was excruciating as Larry's hand closed around his wrist, wrenching the gun free. "You think you can beat us?" he sneered, the question a declaration of war. The others closed in, their faces twisted into grotesque masks of rage. Ethan felt a cold, hard object press against his groin and realized with horror that it was the muzzle of the BB gun. The shot was a white-hot bolt of agony, the BB lodging in his flesh. He crumpled to the ground, the world swimming around him. Through the haze of pain, he heard the sound of the gun being recocked, the metallic click a promise of more to come. They took turns, each shot a new level of hell, each one driving him deeper into the abyss. The laughter grew fainter, the world darker, until all that was left was the pain and the cold embrace of the asphalt beneath him. As they left him there, broken and bleeding, Ethan knew that this was his new reality. He had been claimed by the night, a sacrifice to the dark gods of Willow Creek. The candy in his pumpkin was forgotten, the sweetness of innocence lost forever. Halloween had become a night of horrors that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He lay there, his pirate costume torn and stained with blood, his body a roadmap of their brutality. The pain from his bruised and swollen genitals was a constant reminder of the price he had paid for trying to fit in. Each breath was a battle, a fight against the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. With a trembling hand, Ethan reached down to touch the wound. His fingertips came away sticky with blood, the coldness of the metal BB a stark contrast to the warmth of his lifeblood. He could feel it, embedded deep, a twisted memento of the night's events. The pain was a living thing, pulsing with every beat of his heart, a constant companion in the quiet alley. He managed to push himself into a sitting position, his head spinning. The world was a blur of shadows and pain, but he had to move. He had to get away from here, from them. The cobblestones bit into his palms as he stumbled to his feet, the agony in his groin a sharp counterpoint to the throbbing in his head. The sound of their laughter grew fainter as he staggered away, the weight of his shattered dreams a leaden burden. The alley was a prison of his own making, the walls closing in around him. He had to find a way out, had to find a way to survive. The night air was cold, but Ethan barely felt it. His body was numb, his mind racing with a million thoughts that all led to one conclusion. He was alone. The gun was gone, the power it had briefly lent him now just a memory. He was just a boy, a pirate without a ship, adrift in a sea of fear. The blood trickled down his thigh, a crimson river that painted the alley with his pain. Each step was a battle, a war between the need to escape and the agony that threatened to overwhelm him. He stumbled, his legs giving out, but he forced himself to keep moving. He couldn't let them win, couldn't let them take his dignity along with his innocence. Finally, the alley opened up into a street, the light from a distant street lamp a beacon of hope. He hobbled towards it, his vision swimming. The sirens had stopped. The partygoers had dispersed, leaving only the echoes of the night's horror behind. The candy in his pumpkin clinked against the plastic, a mocking reminder of the fun he had once sought. As he emerged into the light, he saw the first signs of life, a group of teenagers dressed as zombies staggering along the sidewalk. They stared at him with a mix of shock and revulsion, their makeup suddenly seeming all too real. He tried to call out, but his voice was a raspy whisper, lost to the wind. They approached cautiously, their eyes widening at the sight of his blood-soaked costume. One of them, a girl with fake blood smeared across her face, reached out a trembling hand. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine concern. Ethan looked at her, his eyes glassy with pain, and realized that he didn't know how to answer. Was he okay? Would he ever be okay again? He took a deep breath, the cold air searing his lungs. "Help me," he managed to croak, the words barely audible. The zombies looked at each other, their costumes a stark contrast to the very real horror that stood before them. They didn't know him anything, but in that moment, they were the only people in the world that mattered. They helped him to their car, the girl's gentle touch a stark contrast to the brutal hands that had just moments ago been tearing him apart. The warmth of the car's interior was a stark contrast to the chilling alley, and Ethan felt a small spark of hope flicker to life. They drove him to the nearest hospital, the girl's voice soothing and calm as she talked to him, trying to keep him conscious. The world outside the car was a blur of lights and shadows, each bump in the road sending a fresh wave of pain through his body. As they pulled into the emergency bay, the doors of the car flew open, and suddenly, there was a flurry of activity around him. Nurses and doctors rushed over, their faces a blur of white masks and scrubs. He heard the girl explaining what had happened, her voice shaking, and he felt a surge of gratitude for her kindness. But even as they lifted him onto the gurney, the fear didn't leave him. He knew that the night wasn't over, that the demons of Willow Creek were still out there, waiting for him. And then, as the hospital doors slammed shut behind him, the world went dark. Ethan awoke to the cold, antiseptic smell of a hospital room. His head was pounding, and his body felt like it had been through a meat grinder. He tried to sit up, but a hand pressed firmly on his chest, holding him in place. "Easy there, kid," a gruff voice said. He looked up to see a burly man with a thick mustache, his eyes filled with a mix of concern and anger. "You're lucky to be alive." The door to the room burst open, and Deshawn's dad stormed in, his eyes wild with rage. "You little snitch!" he spat, the words echoing in Ethan's pounding head. The room spun as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Before he could react, a hand shot out, slapping the girl who had been helping him so tenderly. "You got no right to mess with my boy!" the man roared, his fist clenched tightly around a gun. The world went still, the air thick with the promise of violence. The girl stumbled back, her hand flying to her face, her eyes wide with shock. Ethan's heart felt like it was being squeezed in a vice, his breath coming in ragged gasps. This couldn't be happening. It was all a terrible nightmare, a trick of the mind. But the cold metal pressed against his forehead was all too real. The gunshot rang out, a deafening crack that seemed to shatter the very fabric of reality. Ethan felt a sharp pain, a white-hot burst of agony that consumed him. His vision blurred, and the room grew distant, as if he were watching the scene unfold from far away. He could see the horror etched on the faces of the zombie-costumed teenagers, their expressions frozen in a tableau of shock, and then darkness. The pain receded, replaced by a cold, empty void. He was falling, tumbling into a bottomless pit of nothingness. He reached out, desperately searching for something, anything, to hold on to, but his fingers found only air. He could feel the life draining from his body, his thoughts slipping away like sand through an hourglass. And then, silence. The room stilled, the chaos of moments ago replaced by a deafening quiet. The pain receded, leaving behind a numbness that spread through him like a gentle embrace. He could see the faces of Mike and Jake smiling at him from the doorway, their girlfriends forgotten. They beckoned to him, their eyes filled with a warmth that seemed to chase away the shadows. With a final shuddering breath, Ethan let go. He felt himself rising, floating above the room, the pain and fear of the night falling away like a discarded costume. The world of Willow Creek was left behind, a fading memory of a night that had stolen everything from him. But as the light grew brighter, he heard a whisper, a faint echo of a voice that wasn't quite his own. "Remember me?" it said, the words tinged with a sadness that cut through the warmth. And with that, Ethan was gone, leaving behind only the empty shell of a boy who had once dreamed of a perfect Halloween.